breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
All right, everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with the Docs. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos, my co-host, as always, Dr. Glenn Harrison. How's it going, bud?
Doing great. How are you this evening?
Good. I am glad the weather's finally starting to turn. There's, starting to get a little
snow
nicer.
on the ground? Is there snow on the ground there?
Yeah, I mean, we're recording this and it's like late April, and actually on Sunday it snowed.
Okay.
So that was not ideal.
So you were having a hard time staying motivated with your daily efforts when there was snow. You thought it was summer, but it wasn't summer.
Well, it's been interesting because probably like 2 weeks ago it was 70, and then that was on a Wednesday, and then on Saturday it snowed 10 inches. So it's been a little bit hard to stay consistent and see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm glad summer's finally coming. So if this is, without talking any more about the weather, as interesting as you all think that is, if this is your first time watching, listening, tuning in, please hit like and subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're going to continue to roll out new topics each and every week, or every other week, I guess now. So today, this is something that you and I see very frequently in our offices. And I think that maybe it could be applied to other facets of people's lives as well, other than healthcare. And that is when less is more. And what we mean by that is, if you just stick to the process and you trust that the process is going to work, sometimes less interventions, less effort, but more targeted efforts are really what is going to get you the best results.
That's so true. We were talking about this. We're trying to, kind of put the name together, and we're like, how are we going to piece it together? But we see it clinically all the time. I see it in my life. And I think we're very quick to jump to the new shiny thing, the new shiny effort, the new shiny something. And so then we're like, and I've even made this mistake with the people I work with. It was like every week we're adding a big layer of something or multiple layers, because, and I was falling into the mistake. We're adding more and more and more and more. And it's very, very hard to stay focused and be consistent with too much. And I still introduce layers of change and layers of effort, but not to that level. We end up
it's more coordinated, right? So it's like, we're going to do this, but we're going to do this after this period of time. I always like to use the analogy, even if I see some musculoskeletal stuff in my office as well, or say it's like a neurological rehab case where you're like, I'm going to give you 3 things, because if we give you 3 things, it's easy to do 3 things. If I give you 7 things, you'll do none of those things. So, and then, if you got a result, whatever that result is, it could be good or bad, right? So it could be a positive outcome or a negative outcome. You can go, okay, the positive or negative outcome is from one of these 3 things. But if you add 10 all at the same time, you have no idea what is doing it.
That's exactly right. And so less is more, because it maintains some focus, it maintains some motivation, and preventing. And we talked about this a lot, where people try something and they don't know if it's working, or they get impatient and then they pivot and then they go to something else. And then they try that for a while, and then they're not sure if it's working and they're uncertain. So then they pivot again, and then they zigzag. And there might've been something that they were doing was right, but they'll never know. Yeah. They'll never know. And the amount of anxiety, frustration, and emotional exhaustion from, well, maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. And
not only that, but also like financial exhaustion, right? So you think about, I mean, I've had patients in the past that are like, well, I tried this and I did it for 2 weeks and it didn't work. So I moved to this, and then I went to this provider and I tried this provider. And you're like, okay, so it's not that any of those providers are wrong or incorrect. They might all be correct. They might all be right. Yeah. But if you're always bouncing back and forth and you don't ever give something like a fighting chance to work, then nothing will work, right? It'd be like going to the gym for 2 weeks and you're like, well, I tried to get in shape and I did arms for 2 weeks and then that didn't work. So I did back for 2 weeks and then that didn't work. So I did legs, and then I'm still out of shape, well, and nothing got bigger.
That's true. It's true.
Nothing got stronger. Well,
and then if people have been struggling with something like we see in our offices, it's just another effort that didn't get them to where they wanted to be. And then they lost even more hope.
Mhm.
and they get jaded, and they lose hope in any effort. And so it's a tragedy. So we want to prevent this tragedy. So that's where we're bringing up the concept why less is more. And
Right.
so that's really why we're talking about it. But talking about sticking to the process, stick with it. And the only way you can stick with something is if you have some faith and some confidence in it. And that's a hard thing to do, especially if you've already been bouncing around and trying all these other things. So sticking to the process, but you have to have some confidence in it. And sometimes you just have to have enough courage, right?
Yeah,
Let's
I mean,
just
we've
give
done
this a
podcasts on
solid,
that
yeah,
before.
I can't even remember what that episode was called, but something about courage. And uh and then having a guide as well. We've talked about this before, having a guide, because how many times in your clinic where somebody comes to you and said, Dr. Kolby, I've tried everything. I've done
Right.
this and I've done this and I've done this, but I don't know, maybe it's this. But you know what? On the other hand, I tried this and it could have been that, but I wasn't too sure. So I tried this. And it's like this crazy zigzag for maybe years.
And
Years.
those are difficult cases even for us as practitioners, because then you're like, holy cow, where do you start? You know what I mean? And that's where, in my opinion, and this is where I start. I don't know, maybe you're different. I'm like, okay, we got to start at the bottom. And it's not that I don't believe you, and it's not that I don't believe everyone else that you've seen for this, but like I'm not going to take their word for it, because things have probably changed in the last since this started 3 years
That's
ago.
right.
And they're difficult. So it's not just difficult for the patient; it's difficult for us too. But that's when you have, and it's applicable to us too, right? Because we want to get them better faster.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, well, maybe we'll try this. And then you're like, well, did I just self sabotage this? You know? So it's not
Like
just,
the provider pivoting too
yeah,
fast. Oh
yeah.
yeah, and I've done that as well. And every time I want to pivot quicker, I'm like, no, let's hold the line here a
Stay the
little.
course. Stay the
Yeah,
course.
stay
Yeah.
the course a little longer.
This
And
is why you outlined it in their treatment plan. Like, we're gonna do this for this long, you know?
and then the world gives in, and we start to see something that bends. And if we allow for enough time, a timeline, enough of a commitment, enough of a agreed upon time where we don't ask questions about the time, we just hold the line for an X amount of time and get that agreement out of the way right away. And then, like you say, starting from the ground up again, getting down to the foundation and holding the line and keep working through it. It's hard to do. It's really, really hard to do, not only like you're saying for the patients, but also for the provider, because of, we both get impatient. Both get
Well, and you
impatient.
get the dump, right? So they come in and it's like
Mm-hmm.
they've been dealing with it for 3 years, and you have to try to navigate all of it in that a lot allocated time. Um, so there's definitely a lot of trust that goes between, the provider patient. Um,
Yeah.
that's why but I think you're correct. I think that's why you have to have very clear, like, and concise goals. And I think that breaking it down into a couple of different types of goals too, because as you know, like, these cases that get tricky and they've been bouncing all over the place, they have a lot of, like, it could be health, not health issues, but mental issues, and or psychiatric stuff, or like anxiety, stress.
Hmm?
So that's when you're
It's
like,
like
okay,
medical
this is,
trauma. It's like
yeah,
medical
yeah,
trauma.
it's like PTSD, right? Because they've been sick. And
They've
so
tried everything, and yeah.
setting the goals, bringing in the other people that are going to help you stick to the process, right? So that
Uh-huh.
if that means like a little bit of support, um,
Yeah.
in the mental, from a mental health provider or something like that, or if you're trying to, whatever it is, you could bring a fitness person involved or whatever. But having those goals set and having the appropriate team around you is like,
Yeah.
and
And then
stay in the
having,
course.
yeah, and having an agreement ahead of time. Because the last thing, and I've made this mistake, we're like, okay, let's work on this. See, I didn't define, we're going to work on this for this period of time. We're going to hold the line. And then what happens? Then the patient is like, well, how long do we do this for? Like, what the hell's coming down the pipe?
Yeah.
How do I have I kind of can wrap my head around this if I
Is
don't
there a
have
metric that I keep, like?
yeah, a time, a stamp where we're gonna change course, pivot, or reevaluate. So I think that's very important as well. And it's hard to do
It's way
as
hard
a
to do because you
provider.
don't know
You,
exactly
you
how it's
don't
going
know
to
it.
go,
Yeah, you could see a change in 2 weeks. You could see a change in 2 months. So then, how do you gauge when you're going to pivot?
So there
Um,
is some fluidity to it. but also going like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever. And then we're going to reevaluate. Then we're going to
That's
see where
right.
your symptoms are at. And then at that time, we're either going to go this direction or this direction.
Or we're going to hold the line.
Yep. Or we'll
Yeah.
stay where we're at and keep doing it longer.
Yeah. So,
There's,
so,
you know,
so kind of to high level, the reason why we're bringing in this kind of, I don't know, not a traditional episode that we're talking about, but it's critical for anybody that is trying to improve their health, that has been bouncing around from providers, that feels overwhelmed with their lifestyle efforts, where they're adding more and more and more and more and more in, and it's easy to get defeated because you already have an existing health problem. You add all these emotional burdens and tasks and requirements. So this episode is really to kind of address these concerns of what we see on our side of the aisle, is also what the providers experience. That's why we're bringing this up. So to try to recap, what do we need? Having a guide, doctor, provider that's going to set goals, set timelines, hold accountability, and help you stick to the line as you need. And hopefully they do that communication up front of what they're going to work on with you, what it's going to look like, and when there's going to be a check-in period. That makes it so much easier to hold the line, because you should be able to trust them that they're going to steer you so you don't need to bounce around constantly. So having that provider is a big thing. What's another thing? You talked about community, and I know we didn't even talk about it, but trying to get a peer group together or something like that, like you and I do.
Yeah. Yep. And we've done podcasts on this too, like about having a good support group. But I think that like having the other variables, right? Because you can address the medical side of it, or say it's like, metabolic or whatever it is, but maybe you've got some trauma, maybe you've got some anxiety because you've been dealing with it for so long. Maybe that's a piece that you pull in. That's when, and honestly, if you have someone that you trust and you mesh really, really well with, I'm sure I have a bunch. I'm sure you do too, of like people in the Rolodex where I'm like, I really love this person for this. I'm going to send you to them.
That's right.
And then the nice part is too, is that usually the provider has a professional relationship with them as well, so that they trust them. So they've kind of gone through that like vetting process for you.
That's right.
So that piece is really nice. And then I think just being like realistic, if you've been what you've been trying to do, if you're listening to this podcast, in all likelihood is it's not been working, right? So realistically, you're going to have someone that you trust, that you mesh with, that outlines the treatment plan with you, that has some goals. There has to be some fluidity with them, but you just have got to trust them and stay the course. And it could take time, it could take up to a year. It could take, whoever knows how long. But one thing's for sure, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get the same results. So
that's right. Sometimes it's like, okay, we're going to start from the ground up again, and again, get somebody that's going to have that discussion, set reasonable time check-ins, and help you stay the course. I think that's absolutely critical, because when people are working on it on their own, again, they're back and forth. It turns into a kind of they run out of emotional stamina. It turns into an emotional marathon where there's constantly lost hope. So I'm all about do it yourself. I know you are as well.
Yeah.
Some things.
Yeah.
It can be really, 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 really tough. So I guess that's the episode today. How to stick the course, and more is not better, and some tools or some strategies to dial it in, get the help so you can get.
Yeah. And if you guys would like to get a hold of us, obviously, if you guys enjoyed this, please hit like and subscribe. Keep listening. Turn on notifications so you get them when we come out with a new one. If you guys would like to get a hold of us, our email is info@brainstormingwiththedocs.com. If you'd like to check out our websites, Dr. Glenn's is full of a ton of information. His is drgharrison.com. Mine is northlakeschiropractic.com. And again, turn on, stay tuned. If you guys have questions on supplements or anything like that we use during our podcast, or you would like some more information, please contact us on the email and we'll get a link sent out to you guys. Otherwise, stay tuned. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the next one.
Right. Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye, man.